Hello and welcome to Shy Talk, an Irish history podcast. This week's episode is part 4 on our series on the glorious Twelfth, the celebration of the 12th of July. And this week, after 4 weeks, we finally get to the big one. This is it, the Battle of the Boyne. This is what it was all about. And the number of episodes in this series has changed as we kept writing it, but next week is the last one. We're going to tie it all up in a bow, and then normal service will resume. Before we get into the episode, I just wanted to say if you've enjoyed any of this podcast, maybe give us a rating on whatever podcast app you use. Don't even have to write a review. Just give it 5 stars and then say C above or blank. That way it just seems so good it's self-explanatory. And if you've disliked the podcast in any fashion, you could head over to Buy Me a Coffee and send us an angry $5. Really just to stick it to us, you know? Jason especially, he hates that sort of stuff. So all of these episodes are kind of standalone. You could listen to any of them without having to listen to the others because we've given them all brief recaps. So up until this point, we've seen how the Church of England came about, the reign of the Stuart monarchy in the mid-1600s, with Charles II converting to Catholicism on his deathbed, his brother James taking over, pissing everyone in the country off, kicking off the Glorious Revolution where the British establishment invited over William Prince of Orange, the stadtholder of the Dutch Republic. They invited him over to England to kick James out. He did it in a matter of days with very little injured on either side. I think it's sometimes referred to as the Bloodless Revolution. James runs off to exile in France and the protection of his cousin Louis XIV. From there he goes back to Ireland with a load of French men and military officers. His old friend, Fighting Lion Richard Dick Talbot, has been Lord Lieutenant of Ireland for most of James's reign, and he's slowly trying to restructure the country to get it back to its pre-Cromwell days when the Catholic gentry were in charge. So he stacked the army and government positions and legal positions all with Catholics. And with the arrival of James II, they essentially declare a revolution against the throne, and King William, who is now, along with his wife Mary II, the new monarch in town. Most of the country of Ireland goes along with it because it's a predominantly Catholic country, and this is good news for the boys, but there's a couple of Protestant holdouts, the main one being Derry in the north. So last week's episode we covered mostly the siege of Derry / the London siege of Londonderry. Essentially, after 105 days, the people of Derry win out against James's forces. They get a load of new provisions in from William, and the siege is broken. And that's how we finished off the last episode, with that defeat for James and his boys. So now we're moving on to episode 4, the Battle of the Boyne.
Acting rage, they vowed revenge upon King William's forces, and oft did cry vehemently that they would stop their courses. A bullet from the Irish came which grazed King William's shoulder. They thought his majesty was slain, but he just said, "Pray no closer."
So remember, like the other big outlier in Ireland is Enniskillen. They had also closed their gates to the Jacobite forces. And on the 31st of July, about 2,000 men led by Governor Gustav Hamilton and Colonels Berry and Worsley, they defeated 3,000 of Justin Macartney's men in Newtown Butler.
Worsley berry sounds like a delicious fruit.
It does. It does sound like a good flavour of ice cream. And then the other guy, like the governor of Enniskillen, was called Gustav Ludvigsson Hamilton, and he was from Sweden.
I can't pronounce that. You're going to have to go again.
Gustav Ludvigsson Hamilton.
Ludvigsson Hamilton.
Because
I like to think you knew that I could get the Gustav and the Hamilton. It
was the Ludvigsson, which I guess is son of Ludwig. But I don't know about you, but I kind of thought, when I think of Ireland in the past, I tend to think of the years between 1845 and like 1916. So that small period in between the famine and the rising, where Ireland was just a miserable, homogenous country. But here we have, like, whenever I read the name Gustav Hamilton, like, there's so many people in this story that are like from all over the world. Like, what was a Swedish man doing as mayor of Enniskillen?
What was a Swedish man doing in Ireland?
That's what I mean. And he was like, there's nothing really about him other than It was just a normal thing. These people came from all over the world, as they do now, to live in Enniskillen.
Well, it's a beautiful country, in fairness. That we tend to take that for granted. Because the amount of times I've met people who've been like, I went to Ireland for 2 weeks and I want to move there for the rest of my life. They're like, you didn't stay long in Dublin, did you?
Yeah.
You got on the plane, you went straight to Kilkenny, you saw Cork for 2 days, 2 nights in Galway. Maybe you drove through Athlone but didn't have to hear anyone speak. And then you might have done the Game of Thrones or Titanic tour in Belfast. Now this, granted, I was going to say you could do it all in one day, but I'm sure there's probably one bus company out there that will do a tour like that. So I'm always surprised by the Americans who can come over and see more of our country in the space of 4 days than we can in like 40 years.
Yeah. But they never get to know the true Ireland, Jason.
Getting drunk on yourself and trying to eat a burger while it's still in its wrapper.
That's it, exactly. As a seagull runs off with your burger and you're still eating down in the wrapper.
It's about right. Jesus, I miss home.
Ah, God, did it make you sick? So, Gustav Hamilton and Worsley Berry, they've got 2,000 men on their side. Justin McCartney, who's the same guy who was involved in the Bandon siege in the last episode, he's got 3,000 men. They fight at Newtown Butler, and apparently, and again, this is because a lot of the, history is written by the victors. According to a lot of the Protestant sources, all of the Jacobite men ran away as soon as the first shots were fired. Which, that might be true.
Cowards.
Talbot sent his best men over to James to fight in England the first time against William. So there's not that many men left, and everyone he's kind of trained and hired since, they're not exactly the best of the bunch, There is a good chance that they, like, a lot of them hadn't seen battle before.
Are you trying to justify, like, the idea that they might have just run off?
So all these guys they'd hired, they're just like fresh hires.
Yes.
They'd never held a gun. They'd never even seen a gun.
Yeah, so I would expect them to run away at the first sign of action. That seems fair to me. Like, I would do it.
Yeah.
Like, when Braveheart is there, William Wallace in that movie.
Yeah.
And he's going, as they're all barreling down towards him on their horses, and he's saying, when all the lads get on their knees, and he goes, hold, hold, hold. I wouldn't. As soon as he'd say hold the first time, I'd be like, all right, well, everyone else is doing it, so peer pressure. And then by the second one, I'd be like, well, they're still, we're not going to do anything. We're not, and I'd be gone. By the time he'd have said the third hold, I'd be so far over the brow of the hill. I'd be, you're not catching me. You can all die. No. I'm not having it.
And you're dead right, Jason. And, you would have been an asset to any army back in the day.
Well, I never watched the rest of the end of that movie. I knew that England was still in charge of Scotland, so whatever happened in that battle wasn't that important.
Yeah, sure enough. Well, I mean, you could say the same about this whole story. You kind of have an idea of how it's going to end. But, we'll continue on anyway. And then James II slew the cowardly William III, and a reign of peace and Catholic prosperity descended across the land for the next 2,000 years. And thus ends...
Wait a minute.
That's why we live in New Jamestown now. But apparently the lads ran, Justin McCartney's lads ran at the first shots that were fired. I don't know. About 1,500 of them were killed anyway. Apparently a lot of them were drowned in the lakes around Enniskillen as they tried to escape. And McCartney himself. So McCartney is the guy who defeated the militia at Bandon. He's very high up in the Irish army, but he made a right balls of this, and he ends up getting captured. So later on he's like let out on parole, but then he escapes to Dublin, and then later on to France, I think. And it was remarked that he was meant to be a man of honour, but no less could be expected from an Irishman. Now, I know, but before you get too up on your high horse, if you were let out on parole, and they said, right, we've killed all your men, the war's not going too well for your side, but you can walk around Enniskillen, you just have to be back before dark. There's no one watching you. What would you do?
I mean, I think we all know what I would do. I'm a lying...
I think we would.
I'm a lying, dirty, cheating, thieving scumbag. But I think that there's been enough men throughout Irish history over the years. Who was the dude who he wanted to get a pardon before he could escape?
Yeah, John Mitchell.
Yeah. Think about how steadfast he is in his beliefs, and how his word is his bond, Kevin.
Yeah.
So, I think I've lost a modicum of respect now.
But it's the same with the other guy, Richard Hamilton, who, like, William sent him over to talk to Talbot, and as soon as he got over, he went back to Talbot's side. There's an awful lot of trust placed, and maybe that's something we lost along the way. There's an awful lot of, like, gentlemanly trust placed in prisoners, which is nice to see, but after a certain point, you got to take responsibility for your own actions, you know? You can't be letting prisoners wander around.
Yeah.
On the good of their word.
It's a tough call. It's a tough call.
So after these two major setbacks, the Jacobite forces, they pull out of Ulster and they regroup outside Dundalk.
The Jacobites pulled out.
Yeah.
So they're a little more Catholic than you'd think.
Or a little more Protestant.
Both, I imagine. I think it was the active birth control idea for both sides of Christianity.
No, I don't. The Catholics wouldn't approve of the pull-out method.
Oh, I think that was the newfangled, found, cool, hip thing to do in the early 2000s. Surely that's what they're teaching now.
The pull-out method.
Yeah. They must be open, because there's no way they're telling people to wear condoms. So they're probably like, pull out, but what you should do is wait till the very last second to pull out. I'm sure that's what the Catholic Church are teaching us now.
The pull-out method is a sure thing, and if you don't believe me, you can ask my 16 children. They'll set you straight.
Don't ask the 3 of them that have kids, though.
They're busy with they've got their own problems. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's one of the main differences between Protestants and Catholics in the 20th century. Access to contraceptives.
Prophylactics.
Yeah, when were prophylactics legalised in the Republic of Ireland? Like the 90s?
Is it the 90s?
Maybe?
Yeah, I think it was early 90s, which is crazy.
It is mad, but it does explain a lot.
Yeah, but also, whenever they did legalise them, then both of us turned up about a year after.
No, I think we might have squeaked in under the radar. Hang on. Yeah, I think it was 90. So there's a couple of laws. Yeah, it was 1992 when, or 1980 you could buy them, but you needed to have a prescription. I think you could only really buy them if you were married and had a note from your doctor. You need a prescription. Yeah, you had to have a note from your doctor saying, "Please God, I cannot have any more children."
Doctor, you've got to help me. There's this white sauce that comes out of my penis and it's impregnating women. What's the cure? Here's a prescription for condoms.
I've had 16 children, doctor. For God's sake, is there nothing you can do? You could at least stop giving himself Viagra. I'd say if you looked up when we're like, what's the scientific term for Viagras?
Soft willy pills.
I'd say whenever... If you looked at the dates for when willy pills were legalised and the dates where you could buy contraceptives, I'd imagine there was a bit of a gap there. But anyway, well, yes, I suppose this was an early example of the pull-out method being used in Ulster. You're right, Jason. But they pulled out of Ulster and they regrouped outside of Dundalk. So as they were going, they applied a scorched earth policy where they just burnt everything so that the Williamites wouldn't have any supplies. Which I guess also means that the good citizens of Ireland wouldn't have any supplies either, but sure, listen, they'll figure it out themselves.
Who needs them?
Food, fields, forget it. Well, it's not very sound.
No, but sure, it's history, Kevin. Most people aren't.
But, like, you could have at least, like, it's not that much ground to cover. There's no need to burn everything. So, King Billy's second in command during the Glorious Revolution was Frederick von Schonberg. He gets made a Knight of the Garter for his services, and he gets a load of cash. He gets about 100k as compensation for... He was a French Huguenot Protestant, and after Louis revoked the Edict of Nantes, he lost a lot of his land, but he'd also fought against Catholic Spain, which was a big...
That's a big no-no.
He'd basically been fucked over by Louis, and William welcomed him into the flock, gave him a load of cash, and then on the 16th of July, he was appointed chief in command of the expedition to get James out of Ireland. They didn't seem to have a catchy name for it. I thought it would have been like...
No, you thought they were going to have a name for him being kicked out of the country?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, they named it the Glorious Revolution. They have this whole mission to, like, kick James out of Ireland.
I suppose there was a declaration of indulgence.
There was, yeah. But it's just the expedition to get James out of Ireland. There's no pizzazz in it. You know, how do you sell it to the mainstream media?
Well, what would yours be? Surely you can't throw shade at these people now from hundreds of years ago and not come up with your own.
I got nothing.
Oh, you bastard.
Well, listen, yeah, I'm on the spot, you know. It's not as if I wrote this story a week ago and haven't bothered to think about it and to say.
That's fair. But also, maybe that person was on the spot. Maybe that guy was there with his... I actually don't know how they used to make newspapers. I'm sure it's a lot of machines and small bits of metal with ink on them, and then they'll just stamp everything onto the paper. It would be long and arduous and boring as shit.
Probably. But so on the 16th of July, he was appointed chief in command of the expedition to get James out of Ireland. Schoenberg was about 75 at this stage, but he was 65 at heart and still seen as the best man for the job. On the 13th of August, Schoenberg lands at Bangor with about 20,000 men, and he travels overland to lay siege to Carrickfergus on the 20th, and by the 28th they surrender, which is not that long. That's an 8-day siege.
I was going to say, that's not 105 days.
It is not, Jason. Even you could do that.
If it was only 5 days, for sure.
So, as we kind of talked about earlier on, because of James's actions in the Patriot Parliament, giving land back to the Catholic gentries, the fate of the Protestants in Ireland were now tied to William's success. So if James won, they lost everything. So naturally enough, most Protestants in the country joined up with Schoenberg, rode in behind him. The majority of them were Scots-Irish from the Ulster plantations, and a lot of them called themselves Enniskilleners after the battle at Enniskillen.
Feels like there's a better name there. That's not very good.
It does, yeah. I mean, I guess that was the big battle that they won, and that kind of shows up, like the Enniskillen Dragoons become this regiment throughout British military history. They're pretty proud of themselves for this.
I still think, yeah, but what they have in patriotism, they more than lack for in grammatical ingenuity.
They don't need snappy names, Jason. No, they're right there winning battles. Listen, let the PR team deal with that stuff.
Well,
bearing in mind,
they should have called it Enniskill Sleep Repeat.
They should have called it Enniskill All Tigers. Well, guaranteed, if they called themselves Enniskill All Tigers, that name would have stuck with the regiment throughout history, and we'd be talking today about like how they should rename Enniskill All Tigers, and people would be saying it's not really racist, it's about cultural heritage, it meant something different back then, it didn't mean kill all the Tigers literally, it sort of meant kill some of the Tigers, only the bad ones, some of them are probably decent.
And only a handful of the good ones.
Yeah, maybe some of the good ones got killed as well, but listen.
You gotta spend money to make money.
That's not relevant, but I like your attitude. So
two birds in the stone is worth a hand in the bush. What's the...
I think that's it, yes. So now Schoenberg's met up with the Enniskillen crew. He's got a big army of about 20,000 plus behind him. So at this stage, Conrad Rosen, Conrad Rosen's the guy who like brought all the farmers from around Ulster, put them outside the walls of Derry and like threatened to kill them all or just let them starve.
Yes.
Bit of a loose cannon. So Schoenberg's got his big army of 20,000 plus coming down from the north. At this stage, old Conrad Rosen, you know, he's a big French military man. He's taken his knocks during the siege of Derry. He's embarrassed himself a little bit, but now he's still by James's side. It's his chance to redeem himself. He sees the army coming down. He says to James, you know what? Let's just burn down Dublin and get out of here. Let's just leave. At this stage, they're like outside Dundalk still. And he's like, forget it, man. Burn the place.
So quick. No backbone.
I don't know if it's cowardice. I think he just doesn't care.
Give a shit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, he's put in charge of a siege. He's like, why don't we just kill all these people? Why are we waiting for... What's this siege business? Burn everything. He sees an army coming down. He's like, fuck this country, man. Burn it. Let's go.
Yeah. It's... Would it surprise you? I'm sure that would be a common tactic, or it would have been a prevailing tactic that would have probably been shot down a lot. Throughout most of the world's history in terms of sieges, there's always going to be someone there who goes, why don't we just bomb the lot of them? Why don't we just kill absolutely everyone, just ruin the entire place? Because you can't in the eyes of the rest of the world. But why don't we just do it? We won't know until we do it. America got away with it.
That's true. Maybe at this stage no one had tried it, and I just don't think Rosen's heart is in it. He's not really in it for Ireland. So Schoenberg is now heading south with his big army. There's no supplies because the Jacobite boys burnt everything down, which maybe Rosen suggested that as well. I'm not sure. Schoenberg advances with his army towards Dundalk, and he finds Dick Talbot's men there blocking the way. So they set up camp around the 7th of September, but disease breaks out amongst the troops in the camp, and while they're camped there, they're getting picked off by guerrillas called the Rapparees, from the Irish repair, which I'd never heard before. Apparently it's Irish for pike. So they were just lads running out of the hills, stabbing them with a pike, and then running off again. A pike is not exactly a stealthy weapon.
No, I mean, like...
unless it's a very long pike.
Unless you've killed the fish first, I mean, it's going to be... stealth is not... It's not the number one priority of an amphibian.
You're right, actually. Maybe they were just chucking these fish into the camp and letting them wreak havoc.
Yeah. Reek being the operative word. It would be a smelly situation. It'd send a lot of lads home.
It would. But so far in this story, it seems that lads will turn around at any excuse. So maybe a couple of rotten fish are like, I'm done. This is not what I signed up for.
These boots don't match these jeans. I am going home. Where is my bus? Or do you have my Uber booked? Do you have my... You're going to be walking barefoot if you don't shut the fuck up about those boots.
So... Schoenberg's guys are garrisoned outside of Dundalk for the winter of 1689, but between the Rapparee attacks and disease, about I think 5,500 of his men die, which
big numbers.
Which is a lot. Like that's probably the biggest defeat. Disease has killed more men than James's side has so far.
What's it? Which disease again?
I don't know. It just said diseases, so I can only assume it was syphilis.
Probably syphilis, or else what was it probably wouldn't be an STD. Might be, probably wouldn't be.
Oh, I'd say it would.
But this is an army mainly.
Yeah, it's an army, but listen, they're garrisoned outside of Dundalk for 3 months. There's fish being thrown at you.
This is like prison.
The whole place smells.
This is like going to prison as a mobster. You just don't speak about it. It's fine. You don't talk about it. It's not a bad thing. It's just never brought up. But if anyone ever does it, you kill them.
You just get on with it. But sure, the people of Dundalk, maybe they were going out making a bit of trade, bit of extra cash.
Do you think the problem was that they were like, they've got doctors from outside Louth, and then they're all going, all these people have this horrible disease. No, that's just the way they're born. That's just the people of Dundalk.
There'll be no more about my hometown. But Schoenberg was apparently so embarrassed by getting slapped around by the Rapparees that he offered the 100,000 he'd been given by William. He offered that back to him for the war effort. I get 100,000 is an awful lot of money.
Yes, a lot. Even in today's money.
So you'd want to be like pretty. Although he's 75, it's not as if he's got like long years to use his money.
But against the popular saying, Kevin, some people believe you can actually take it with you. So who knows? Maybe he just wanted to buy himself a very fancy coffin. Pure gold, maybe. Solid gold bars, please.
With little or no respect for the pallbearers. So Schoenberg's guys are locked in for the winter and into the spring of 1690. And meanwhile, over in James's camp, on the 24th of March, Antoine Camus of Lausanne came over from France, and he replaced Deveau and Rosen. They both returned to France on the 8th of April on the ship that had brought Camus. This is probably a good trade, because I think so far Rosen's main contribution to the efforts had been to murder a lot of farmers and then attempt to burn everything down and run away.
It's good tactic.
It is a fine military tactic. And listen,
but also,
you won't know until you try.
It is the tactic of like my weekends as a 10-year-old child in the country. I'm going to burn shit. I'm going to kill some farmers. I'm going to run away. Yeah,
so they swap him out for, and the whole, so that's been his contribution. Whereas in comparison, Camus had helped James's wife and child escape during the Glorious Revolution. He'd taken them out of England and over to France and brought them to Louis. So in spring, right, Schoenberg, he's embarrassed. He's lost a lot of men to syphilis or some other unnamed disease. They're getting picked off. he needs a win, you know. He needs to get back on the horse. So in spring, they set off and they capture the village of Charlemont in Armagh, which I can't find a census record as to how many people were in Charlemont at the time, but I would imagine it was somewhere between 10 and 11.
100?
No.
Ah.
But you know, listen, when you run a losing streak, you need to get back into it, all right? You need to ease yourself back in.
I've had many a friend say that in a pub, and it's still not work out well for them.
But yeah, you need a win. But he captures Charlemont. He sends word back to William that he's captured Charlemont. William presumably says, "What the fuck is that?" It's not enough. He still hasn't made any progress south. He's still stuck at Dundalk, and it's at this stage that King Billy decides it's time for him to get his hands dirty. So on the 14th of June in 1690, King Billy lands in Belfast Lough of Carrickfergus.
Are you saying
with another 16,000 men?
Are you saying it's time to put some blood orange on those hands?
Exactly. This is the I can't remember what Marvel film it's at the end of, but when Thanos says, "I'll do it myself," that's what this is.
Fair. Thanos, the Orange Order version of Thanos.
You mean Black and Thanos? He snaps his fingers and gets rid of all Catholics. But yeah, Billy decides if you want a job done, you may as well go do it yourself. So he lands in Carrickfergus on the 14th of June with another 16,000 men, almost a year after Schomberg had arrived the first time. So in the year that Schomberg's been there, he's done feck all. He meets up with Schomberg and they rally their army together at Loch Brickland before marching south towards James. So in about a week, William has made more progress than Schomberg had done in a year.
Oh, not good. Not good for Schomberg.
It's not good, no. But listen, that's why he's wearing the big boots, you know. This is why he wears the crown. So the Jacobites try and fight Billy on the way down, but they fail, so James retreats south. He burnt down Castle Bellingham Castle on the way because Colonel Thomas Bellingham had apparently shown Billy the way or something. Not entirely sure. I only put that in because that's beside my parents' house, and it's a nice bit of history. So I think they'd been garrisoned in Castle Bellingham Castle.
Have you done that just for the easy Instagram post?
Yeah, I'll be cycling over there later. It's a very nice place, and they offer a fantastic lunch deal. But I put it in there because it just seemed very petty. James garrisoned at the castle, and then I don't know what happened. They got it into his head that Bellingham was helping William's side, so they burnt the place down.
Bastards.
They don't seem to be doing great with the old hearts and minds thing.
I just like to say to stop burning stuff. Just stop
burning stuff.
The country's not big enough to be burning stuff. It's not. This isn't Russia. This isn't like, if we just destroy, hundreds of miles of land as the Germans are coming after us as we retreat, it'll be grand scorched earth. Ireland's not like that. You're ruining it for everyone else for the future. It's not on. The amount of cool houses we lost. Think of the gaff parties we've had to have, and the ones we could have had in giant Protestant mansions.
Well, yeah, like you burn down Castle Bellingham today, what's left, The country's not worth saving. So James keeps retreating south, and they establish a line of defence around where modern-day Drogheda is, along the south bank of the Boyne River, in a town called Dunor. So
we're getting close.
This is it, Jason.
The Battle of Dunor.
Yeah, the famous Battle of outside of Drogheda. So apparently, while checking out the fords to cross the Boyne, one of James's own troops accidentally shot him in the shoulder.
Accidentally in the hole.
Yeah, I don't know. So
which is funnily enough what the bullet left in him.
Yeah. Apparently it is substantial enough wound in his shoulder. This is about, 2 or 3 days before the battle. No, it must be 2 days before the battle. But so I don't know what they were doing. Like, the opposition wasn't there yet. I don't know if he was just practicing how to use his gun and then shot James.
I think, he might have been practicing how to use his gun, and the practicing went very well.
Knowing James's military tactics, that man was probably promoted then to lead the army. Well, he can shoot a bullet. Get him up front.
Oh my God, I'm a natural.
He almost killed me. If he can do the same to William, this war is as good as won, baby. Get that man a place of prominence. On the 29th of June, Billy catches up with him. James, at this stage, has an army of about 24 to 25,000. mostly made up of Irish, with a few French soldiers coming over from Louis, and then some English and some Scotch Jacobites who followed James into exile and then over to Ireland.
A Scotch Jacobite sounds delicious.
Yeah, listen, it goes down well with an iron brew.
I've never been a big fan of the eggs, but I feel like a nice covered Jacobite.
Yeah. So the Irish cavalry were very well trained, but the infantry was mostly peasants. Some of them were armed with farm tools that they brought themselves to the battle. Whereas on the other side, Billy had about 36,000 men, made up of several different countries. There were French Protestant Huguenots, the Dutch, obviously, English and Scottish that he'd brought over, and then Protestant Irish. But apparently Billy trusted his Danish and Dutch soldiers the most, and was pretty suspicious of the British soldiers because they'd been under James's rule, 2 years before this. So he didn't give them any positions of power. Apparently the only British men he trusted were the Ulstermen, who had held Derry and the guys from Enniskillen. They're the only ones who'd proved themselves. So fair play to them, I guess. I mean, I guess that's why they're happy to be involved.
It's all about the taking part that counts, Kev.
Well, for them, their Protestant way of life is being threatened. They want to be able to eat cheese and pineapples on crackers. They want to be able to ride with condoms. They want to not have to believe in transubstantiation. They want to keep all the lands that Cromwell gave them. This is it. They're coming out in force. This is the showdown.
Fair. No beating around the bush as well. They know what they want and they want it now.
Yes. James had apparently proven himself as a battle commander on the sea, but I don't know what you know about geography, Jason. The Boyne is actually a river which has more in common with the land than it does the sea. And not a lot of people know that. So his whole military experience was basically around being on a ship and was pretty useless for a land battle.
Unless you flood the city.
Now you're thinking. Well, maybe they just had a ship on the land and he was standing on the deck with the little steering wheel thing pointing at things.
Maybe.
It just brought him. It just calmed him.
Yeah,
down.
it was more of a crutch than it was an actual necessity. He was using it to get through the day. It made him feel empowered, like a big boy.
But and then on his side, to support him, he had Fighting Dick Talbot and his French General Camus as his commanders. Who, I mean, when you've got Fighting Dick Talbot on your side,
just let him out.
You're pretty much sorted.
You just throw him out front line on his own.
On the other hand, Billy was a seasoned war general. You remember he'd fought off the French and the British during those Dutch wars that we talked about in the last episode. But he'd yet to win a major battle. All those had ended in stalemates. And he had Old Man Schomberg as his commander, who was, again, I'd say at this stage he must have been 76 and had just spent most of the last year in a disease-riddled camp outside Dundalk.
It was called Drogheda.
Yeah. And it's where the town of Drogheda is today. So, in order to recognise each other during the battle, the Williamites wore green sprigs, while the Jacobites tied white strips to their uniforms. So here we are, Jason. All the pieces are almost ready to be put into play. They're both at the Boyne. It's almost July. Apparently, William is superstitious and he didn't want to fight on a Monday, so he waited for a day. I don't know if that's true. That seems like a lie. I don't know if they all just would have hung around. Like, the Boyne is not a big river. I don't know if they all would have just hung around on either side of the river for a day.
I could believe it.
Because it was a Monday.
I could believe it.
Just taking a day
Kevin,
of rest.
Do you think it's some kind of new modern idea that everyone hates Mondays? That's been going on for eons, since the dawn of man. The first caveman woke up and was like, not today, just not today. I just need a lie-in. I can't be dealing with it. I just can't be dealing with it. William
was about to give the attack command and then turned to his second in charge, Lieutenant Garfield, and he shook his head and said no. Whip out the lasagnas, lads. Not today. He was backed up by his Major General Bob Geldof. So yeah, maybe apparently the battle happened on a Tuesday. I don't know, but according to a few witnesses, while William was inspecting the lines before the battle, a Jacobite cannonball bounced off the ground and grazed William's shoulder, and it ripped his jacket and skin. So there's William as well, was almost killed right before the battle.
A lot could have changed, but then wait. Sorry, say that quickly again. How did his jacket get ripped?
So apparently, according to witnesses, the Jacobites just fired a cannonball. It landed on the Williamite side, bounced off the ground and came up and hit William, like grazed his shoulder.
Yeah, so I guess they couldn't just hang around and wait for a day. That's... Now, you...
Well, maybe this was the whole day.
You knew that, because you wrote this story before you came telling it to me. You led me on, Kevin. You led me on. I want an apology.
But that could have happened on the Tuesday. You don't know.
The Jacobites aren't going to do it on a Tuesday. If they've given their word to not fight on the Monday, why would they break that promise early on the Tuesday? They just wait for the actual time to fight. These are good, solid men of Christ.
The fight's starting on the Tuesday. It's time to start firing random pot shots.
12:01
if he had been killed by a cannon,
bang,
smack in the face. If he had been killed by that cannon, you'd imagine every guy in the Jacobite army would have been like, "That was me. I fired the shot. Sure, didn't I raise the cannonball myself? Brought it from home. That was a good cork cannonball. Up Pats." So, also according to another witness, Jacobite Captain John Stevens, all of James's men were stone drunk by the time the battle started. Apparently, a shipment of brandy was supposed to arrive on the front line the night before the battle to keep them all warm, but due to some mix-up, it didn't arrive until the fight was about to start.
So they got drunk.
You can't say no to a sniff. Doesn't matter that you're about to start fighting. I was promised brandy, I'm having my brandy.
Yeah, but what would you do, realistically, if you're like, I'm about to go into a war here, and it's war back in the old days when most people die. So you're like, yeah, I'm gonna get pretty drunk beforehand.
Well, now I'd like you to remember that bit where you said most people die. I'll come back to that in about 2 seconds. But so the battle was fought on the 1st of July, which I know what you're thinking, Jason, but the celebration for the Orange Order is the 12th. At some point in the 1770s, I think, the calendar changed from Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar that we use now, and so everything shifted up a couple of days. So in the Julian calendar, the battle was on the 1st of July, but in the Gregorian calendar, it's on the 11th of July.
Neither of those are the 12th.
Exactly. It still doesn't explain why it's on the 12th, but we'll get into that bit in the next episode.
Oh, our final episode.
The final episode. You got to leave a little bit of suspense. But so on the 1st of July, or the 11th of July, the two sides fought each other on a ford across the Boyne River. Schomberg sent his son, Meinhard, and a quarter of Billy's forces down the road to Slane, and they were going to cross at a ford there in order to attack James's men from the side. They were met there by a man called Neil O'Neill, which is unfortunate.
A terrible, terrible name. One of the worst names we've had on this podcast.
Do you ever meet people who have like the same first name and second name, and like, what were their parents thinking? Did they just... Was it their first child and they were just in a moment of giddy ecstasy in the hospital, just like, you know, it'd be a laugh. If we called him Neil O'Neill, people would love that.
No, I've always assumed it's one of those where it's like the two parents talk to each other beforehand and say, well, look, my family has a tradition. We always needed the last name to continue the lineage, so we'll call the kid Neville. And the other one goes, okay, well, my family has a tradition where we call all the firstborn men Neville. So then it becomes Neville, like Gary Neville's dad.
Is Gary Neville's dad called Neville?
It is, yeah. So then they would sing the song, Neville.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
I suppose, in another life, my grandfather's name was Barney, and I could have been called Bernard after him.
Barney Larney.
I know. It would have been a rough... I think that's the sort of stuff that changes a man. I don't think I would have survived being Barney.
I don't think it changes you. I think it ruins you for life. From the second of the name's inception. Yeah, that's like, sure. Don't have rhyming names, and don't have names that, like, no one should ever be called Mary Hickey, because it's too easy to switch around the first letters of both of those names.
So no spoonerisms and no rhymings. Mary Hickey. So Neil O'Neill, presumably with something to prove, he was guarding the pass at Slane. He was also Talbot's nephew. A lot of the people in this battle are related to Talbot. I don't know, he seemed to have every cousin, nephew, grandson in the whole thing. A great man for the nepotism. So Neil O'Neill is blocking the pass with 800 men, but Meinhard's forces defeat them, and poor Neil O'Neill is killed. So I hope you feel bad for making fun of his name there a few minutes ago. I
don't.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, Kev. I know that he was going to die anyway because the story is hundreds of years ago.
You don't know anything, Jason, alright? Nothing's certain in this world.
Who am I, Javert? No, sorry, that would have been Valjean. He knows nothing of Javert.
So James starts panicking. So he thinks the Minehorse's forces, that's the main Williamite force, and that they're going to outflank him. So he starts sending more troops down towards that ford. But neither side realised that there was a swamp in the way. So now both sides had just sent a whole load of troops down to a swamp where you couldn't cross. And apparently they just ended up sitting the battle out, just firing shots at each other, but they couldn't get to each other.
That's the part of the battalion I want to be in. Whatever part of the army you can I want to be firing guns with no hope of hitting or being hit.
You have to imagine that there's a couple of lads in those battalions like me and you who ran down, realised there was a swamp between them and the enemy, and that there was no time to go back and join the main battle, and we're just like, oh no.
Oh, I better stay here and man the swamp. You don't want them coming through the swamp and getting us from the other end, from the swamp side.
Swamp duty, is it? You may as well call me Shrek, because I'm here. I'll catch up with you guys tomorrow. Let me know where the battle goes. So, meanwhile, back at the actual battle, the main Billy force gets across the main ford and start pushing the Jacobites back. James's illegitimate son, James Fitzjames, who I genuinely actually forgot when we started the whole Neil O'Neill thing. I forgot there was a James Fitzjames coming up.
Good old George.
Did you know that, like, Fitz, like the Fitz prefix in a surname, around this time in the 1600s, 1700s, it was there to show that they were a bastard of a lord or a king.
I had heard that years ago, but it's one of those that you don't know are true or not, and I don't know enough people called Fitz to rub it into. I don't have any friends called Fitz.
Well, I'll tell you now, I'm pretty sure it is true. So that's why his son was Fitzjames. It doesn't explain why he was James Fitzjames, but it's why he was Fitzjames.
Could be like a reverse Bond kind of thing.
James Fitzjames. So, yeah, listeners, anyone you know called Fitzjames, Fitzroy, Fitzgeorge, any of them, they're all sons of bastards. So his illegitimate son, James Fitzjames, also probably with something to prove, he leads a counter-cavalry attack back at the Williamite forces, driving some of the gunmen back into the river. They managed to kill George Walker, who had survived the siege of Derry, only to die here. Schomberg wanted to lead his forces across the river to attack Fitzjames. He rode into the river to rally his men for a counter-attack, but he was wounded twice in the head by sabre cuts and then shot in the neck by a man called Cahir O'Toole of Ballyhubbock and instantly killed. Now, I have no idea who Cahir O'Toole is, but that was specifically written into the source that I read.
It's a great name.
It is a great name. It's better than James Fitzjames.
All of those words were phenomenal. Especially, I particularly enjoyed the part where it said he was wounded in the head, which is like he was killed. He didn't suffer
in those
wounds.
times, yes, he was killed. He mightn't have died instantly, but if he suffered cuts to the head, it's a matter of time. So now, Schomberg's dead. Meinhardt's stuck down in a swamp near Slane, but Billy and his horse managed to make it across the river, and they drove the Jacobites back to Dunor, and then back again to Duleek after that. So, to attack back to where you said, I can't remember what words you used. You said a lot of men die in war.
Yeah, so yeah, in terms of this, am I going to be proven wrong that F all people die at the Battle of the Boyne?
About 6,000, of the 60,000 odd men that were on the battlefield, about 2,000 died.
That's bigger numbers than the Fenian raids.
It is bigger numbers than the Fenian raids, but it's not a lot. About 3/4 of those 2,000 were Jacobites.
Yeah, I expect battles back in the day like that when just two armies line up. I expect a couple of thousand casualties in the first couple of minutes just because the frontline people.
Sure. Well, it seems what happened, most of the Jacobites were grand, but James ordered a retreat pretty early on, which demoralised the men, and the fact that James himself abandoned and ran away.
You can stop calling them the Jacobite boys and you can just start calling them the Jacoboys, like the Venga boys. I believe that would be their collective term.
Well, okay, so the Jacoboys, their army's mostly in good shape. They've lost 1,500 men, but James retreats, which disheartens them. They see him running away, and a lot of them abandon the war. They throw off their weapons and uniforms and just run for the hills. So it's a pretty resounding defeat for James. William marches on towards Dublin. He arrives there about 2 days later, The rest of the Jacobite army had abandoned the city at that point, and they all ran across the Shannon to Limerick. William issued the Declaration of Finglas on the 17th of July, where he offered a pardon to any soldier who surrendered. I don't think he didn't offer it to the officers, but any normal soldier who surrendered would be spared.
It's pretty sad, but obviously it's done there as a way to make sure people surrender. It's like it's the nicest, easiest possible thing to do, but it doesn't really mean worth a shite. It's like, we could spend the energy coming in killing you, or you could all just surrender.
So, well, like William's fought against James twice now. Once in England, once in the Battle of the Boyne, and he's beaten them pretty badly twice. It's and both within like a matter of a couple of hours, it seems. So,
yeah.
You know, it's not as if he's not fronting when he says surrender now or you're dead.
No, it's true. It's very true, but it's
very much so. Yeah.
It's not so. It's kind of a nice thing, but it's like it's the least you could do. It's the least you could do to go, we won't slaughter all of you if you all agree to surrender.
Yeah, fair enough. So James himself fled to Duncannon, and then he was escorted back to France into exile for, I think, the third time in his life.
I'm so jealous.
You'd love it.
I really want to go into exile.
I keep telling you, man, you're in exile. You're not welcome back.
I'm in Texas.
What is James's quick retreat and the fact that he fled the country while he was still supposed to be fighting for Ireland earned him the nickname Seamus Ashaka, or James the Shit.
Okay.
Now, yeah, I've never heard that, but I saw it in quite a few places. So you know what? I'm in.
It was written down at the back of a load of stalls in the plane jacks, was it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If you're looking for a bastard, call this number.
So the Battle of the Boyne is seen as a pretty important victory for William. It's seen as the first defeat of the French by the League of Augsburg in what would go on to be known as the 9 Years' War, where they were trying to stop Louis' conquest of Europe. In terms of Ireland, in terms of what happens in Ireland, it's like the lesser of the two big battles that decide this thing. But from an optics point of view, it was seen as like the first defeat of Louis. Louis was probably pretty annoyed that he put his faith in James, who ran away within about 4 hours.
Yeah, I mean, that's... you don't want to be proven wrong that quickly.
No, I mean, at this stage, Louis is like fighting in mainland Europe. He's coming up against serious enemies, people who don't want him to be there. His cousin James comes over to him looking for help. He's like, man, so you're a Catholic monarchy. Ireland is a predominantly Catholic country. You've had your man Talbot there arming them for years, waiting for this exact situation. There's a couple of Protestants there, sure, but listen, if I send you over a load of men, weapons, and military officers, I think you've got it. I think it's in the bag. The people love you. And then within about 6 months, he's back. He's back.
Yeah, well, basically how that plays in my head is that he's in a room with him, talking to him, telling him this, and when he turns back around to look at his face, he just sees a curtain blowing in the wind. he just ran away. It's too much pressure. I don't want it. I don't like it. I can't handle it.
It's too much. So yeah, Louis would probably be forgiven for thinking that it was a slam dunk, I'll send this Catholic king over to a Catholic majority country. He's already got a Catholic army set up there. Imagine this one's in the bag.
Don't count your chickens before the Irish Catholic reneges on his promise.
It was a bloodbath, Louis. I didn't have a chance. I'm sorry I let you down. It's okay, James. I'm sure you tried your best. 15 men died.
To be honest, it was so violent I couldn't even stay to watch.
So that's pretty much the end of James's part of this story. He's gone. They just got defeated at the Battle of the Boyne. The rest of his Jacobite forces, the Jacoboys, they are all now hiding in Limerick, ready for episode 5, the final episode in this saga of the War of the Two Kings. We've answered the question we set out to answer originally, Jason. This is the Battle of the Boyne, but there's still more to come. There's one more important battle to go, and then the whole thing's done.
Okay, we're nearly there. I feel like it's been I've enjoyed it, but it's a lot of effort to keep up with all of this, because I've had to listen to our released podcasts multiple times to try and refresh my memory. But then it's a lot. It's like 4 hours. It's like listening to a Dan Carlin episode.
I know. Listen, Jason, there's one more episode. I'll throw in a little spicy epilogue about slavery for you, and then that's it. Done. No more long, overarching stories for the rest of the season. Just one hit, funny stories about ducks who got roles in the army, or a man who fell down some stairs.
And jewels that go missing up people's arses, and the Temple Bar prostitutes shooting touts for the IRA.
There you go.
It's the whole thing.
But so that's the end of James the Shit's part of this story. We'll leave it there for this week, and we'll pick up next week for the last in this series. And then that'll be it. Right. So we'll talk to you next week.
Right.
Good luck.
Good luck.